Hello and welcome to Nullitaire Gaming, where we play games with 0 players. Or in other words, we play bots against one another. And in this series, we've been playing Pendragon, The Fall of Roman Britain, which is from GMT Games. It's Volume 8 in the Coin series, designed by Morgan Guillotti. And we've played several rounds already. I recommend you go back and watch it from the beginning if you haven't seen any of that. So I'll put a link in the description of this video to the entire playlist, so you can go back to the beginning and watch it from there if you like. But in this video we're going to set the game up again from where we left off and continue on. So here we go. Okay, the game is set up from where we were. Interestingly, I have no corrections to make from last time. I didn't see any problems, and nobody mentioned any in the comments on the previous video, so I think everything is okay. So we will simply move on. Because both of the eligible factions passed last time, that means all factions are eligible. And the next card is Die Fed. I think that's what that says. And the Scotty are up first. Let's see what they want to do. So we first check, does Scotty have Raiders in 2+ clear? No. The only Raiders on the map are over here in Dumnoni, which isn't clear. So that's no. And or 15+ Raiders on the map. Nope, there's only 5 there. And or greater than 2d6 plunder. Also a no. They only have 1 plunder. Okay, so that's a no. Effective priority event, and Scotty by sequence of play may use it. Yes, this is a priority event. In fact, that's why the Scotty skipped the last turn, so they could have a chance at this. So we see the gray shield in the background there. That indicates a priority event for the Scotty, and they can use it by the sequence of play, so the answer is yes. They will execute the event using this shaded text. Okay, the shaded text says Irish Dynasty. Scotty plays 4 warbands and 1 settlement in Dematai. Well, that's easy enough. So, a settlement and 4 warbands in Dematai. That gives the Scotty control of that region, which means Britain control comes down by 1. It's at 38 now. Okay, the Kiwitates are up next, and they can do a full command and feat. So we'll work through the Kiwitates flow chart. First, battle without feat, evade, or ambush would add Britain control and or greater than 1d6 plunder. Well, the only place they could add control would be at Dematai, which they just lost control, but there's no way that one militia is going to make a big enough dent in the Scotty to get control back. In fact, I think it'll just get destroyed, so without doing anything. So that's no good. And the only place they could get plunder would be here. There's one raider there with some plunder, but again, the one militia is not enough to guarantee that. Okay, so the answer is no to that. Effective event, and Kiwitates by sequence of play may use it. No, the event's already been used. Priority event, first or second on upcoming card, and that is true. This is the upcoming card, Uther. We can see the shield in the background, the Kiwitates, and they're second on this one. Okay, so they are going to pass. The Kiwitates pass, and they gain 3 resources for doing that. They're up to 7. So the Dukes is next eligible. Go to their flow chart. Intercept would battle greater than 2d6 Raiders. Well, they had to roll on that, and they rolled an 11. Okay, well there's no way they could battle 11 Raiders. There's only 5 on the map. Okay, so the answer is no. Next, effective priority event, and Dukes by sequence of play may use it. No, they can't use the event. It's already gone. Priority first or second on upcoming card. Yeah, They also have, the next card, Uther, is also a priority event for them, and they're first on it. So they are going to pass. Okay, so the Kibitates were hoping to be able to take this, but looks like Dukespot is going to take it out from under them. Okay. But the Britons need resources anyway, so that'll add another 3 resources. So the Saxons get an opportunity now. So we'll look at their flow chart. First, Saxons have raiders in 2+ clear. No, they don't have any raiders on the map. And or 15+ raiders on the map. Nope, no raiders. And or greater than 2d6 plunder. Nope, no plunder. So the answer is no. Effective priority event, and Saxons by a sequence of play may use it. Nope, event's gone. Priority for the Saxons, first or second an upcoming card. Well, everyone has priority on the next card, but the Saxons are 4th, so no, they're not first or second. So no. Next, 1d6 roll of 1 to 2, and settled certain to add something. So they're going to have to roll on that. The Saxons roll a 3, so the answer to this question is no. No. This question, here we are, d6 roll of 1 to 2, no. Okay, Saxon warband attack would remove an enemy's last unit and or assault. Now I found that to be a little bit mysterious, but going to the rule book, it just means that a Saxon warband attack has to be sure to remove an enemy's last unit, or it has to be sure to be able to engage in an assault on a stronghold. One or the other. Okay, so the only place where there are Saxon warbands is here, so we have to figure out whether or not a battle there would ensure that the Saxons would be able to, would definitely remove the last piece of either the Dukes or the Civitates, or they would be able to assault the stronghold. In other words, if we can come up with some scenario how the battle could play out where neither one of those two things happened, then they won't do this. I think that's, in my mind, the easiest way to think about it. And I can dream up such a scenario. So, of course, the Saxons could ambush here. These are fens, their home terrain, so they could do that. But assuming that they didn't, and so then in field battle, let's just go through it here. In field battle, and also assuming that neither the Dukes nor the Civitates withdraw. So what would happen in field battle? Well, first the cavalry would attack. Okay, so 2 cavalry would attack. That would take out 2 of the Saxons. Okay. Then the melee step, surviving warbands, federati, comitates, and militia strike. Okay, so now the Saxon warbands do 2 damage, and the comitates do 1. So that would remove one of the Saxons. They do 2 damage back. Now, if the Dukes, if the Dukes and Civitates combined decide to remove both the Dukes pieces, then obviously that would remove all the pieces of one faction. So that would be the kind of outcome the Saxons are looking for here. But they don't have to do that. They could remove, one of each, or both of the Civitates pieces, leaving the stronghold, which is still Civitates. So there are ways to not remove the last piece here. Okay, so maybe like that would do it. Okay. And so we have 1 Saxon warband left and, let's say, 2 Dukes pieces left. Okay. So now would they be able to assault in this case? Right, there is the harass step, but there are no raiders here. Okay. If all defending units evaded, withdrew, or were removed, attacker may try to remove the defending stronghold. Well, that's not true. Because there's still 2 Dukes standing on the battlefield. They did not evade, they did not withdraw, and they were not removed. So, no chance for an assault now. Okay, well, there's a scenario anyway where it turns out that the Saxons neither remove the last piece of some faction, nor do they get to assault. So, as long as that's possible here, they will say no to a battle. So, moving down the flow chart, Saxons have 20 plus raiders available, and a d6 roll of 1 to 4. They do have 20 or more raiders available. They have all of them available, which is 25, so they had to roll. They rolled a 1. Okay, so that means the answer here is yes, they're going to raid. Okay, let's work out the raid that the Saxons are going to do. So, just to remind ourselves how raid works, they can choose up to 3 spaces without Saxon control and adjacent to Oceanus Britannicus or Germanicus, or within 1 space of a Saxon settlement with a Saxon warband, or adjacent to a sea bordering such a settlement. Alright, there are no Saxon settlements, so that part is irrelevant. So we're looking for spaces that are adjacent to Oceanus Britannicus or Oceanus Germanicus. So that's the southern coast here and the south eastern coast over here. Okay, and by the way, those are not patrolled seas, so there's no worry about having to subtract raiders because of the patrol. Okay, which should be mentioned here in the procedure. Okay, cost 1 or 2 renown per target space, and our procedure. Select spaces, pay them, resolve each. Pay 1 renown to place 1 d4 raiders, or 2 renown to place 3 d4. And here's the part about patrolled seas. You subtract the number of forts bordering it. But seas are not patrolled here, so that's irrelevant. If region, those raiders may take prosperity up to the lower of population or raiders as plunder. Each unit may carry only 1 plunder. Then just place raiders may battle an enemy in the space. If Scotty control or settlement plundered, Scotty lose that much renown. Okay, so that's the procedure. Now, how do the Saxons want to pull it off? They want to choose as many regions, not cities, as able. Alright, so that means they're not going to choose London, even though they could get into London from this sea. They don't want to do that. Okay, with Ravage or Surprise. Surprise may deep raid first region below. Alright, so they could either, they want to Ravage, that's their first priority for a feat, and they can do a feat here. They're eligible to do that. And Surprise is the second priority. So we have to see if they can do a Ravage first. Okay. It says where prosperity greater than population. Plenty of places like that. Or if none, add 1 enemy controlled space. Well, every space is enemy controlled, so they'll be able to accomplish that easily enough. Okay. But we're doing this with raid. It says only if dukes and or civitates victory at -2 or better. And that is true, because the civitates, as I've been pointing out, are beyond their victory threshold. So their victory is margin is definitely -2 or better. Okay, so they'll want to Ravage. Where the and looking for places where prosperity is greater than population. Okay, so now we need to go through these priorities and select 3 spaces. Yeah, because we're doing as many regions as able. 3 is the max. So first, roll 3 d4 raiders at enemy control and or 2 plus prosperity. Again, every space adjacent to those 2 C's is enemy control, so that doesn't give us any priority. So we're going to have to go through these sub priorities here. Where least subtraction of raiders. Again, these aren't patrolled seas, so that doesn't do anything. So roll a d6 to determine which of these 2 to do. I did that, and they rolled a 4. Okay. So they want to go where the highest difference in population minus enemy troops. Okay, well then, looking at all the spaces, we want the highest difference, all the spaces adjacent to these 2 C's. We want the spaces that have the highest difference between enemy pieces and population. Well, the winner is Regni down here, which doesn't have any enemy troops in it. Just has some strongholds, but has a 2 population. So the difference is a -2, essentially. So that's the big winner. They definitely want to select that space. And then looking at all the other spaces, there are 3 that have a -1 difference. Kantiaki, where there's 1 troop and 2 population. Trinowantes, which has 1 troop and 2 population, and Koryaltowi, which also has 1 troop and 2 population. So those were all tied here, but they can only select 2 more because they've already selected Regni. So they had to roll randomly to determine, and they selected Koryaltowi and Trinowantes randomly of those 3. Okay, now we're ready to actually do these raids. At Koryaltowi and Trinowantes, the Saxons are going to use Ravage, because those are spaces where prosperity is greater than population. Okay, but they're not going to use Ravage and Regni because there's only 1 prosperity there, and that's not greater than population. I should, I guess, look at the rest of the raid priorities here just to make sure there's nothing more to do. We've selected 3 spaces already just from this first priority, and that's the max. But this, just for completeness, let's look through the rest of it. If free raid, roll 3d4 raiders at most prosperity. This is not a free raid. Next, roll 1d4 raiders at no net raider subtraction and 1+ prosperity. Again, we've already selected the maximum number of spaces, so we can't do that. But lastly, battle only where assault. Okay, so that is to say where assault could remove a stronghold. And we have our battle tactics chart, again, to help us with that. Okay, so let's do these raids. We'll start with Regni. Again, they're not going to do a feat here. They're not going to do Ravage in this particular place, but they are going to roll 3d4. So let's do that. Actually, we have to pay first. So the Saxons paid 6 renown for these 3 spaces. It's going to cost 2 each because they're rolling 3d4 in each space. Wow, they got an absolutely monster roll here. 8 is the roll. Okay, so 8 Saxon raiders invade the coast of Regni. Well, that should strike fear into the heart of the Britons. Okay, so 8 Saxon raiders come into Regni. They pick up the 1 prosperity that's there, and now they consider whether they want to initiate a battle. Okay, and we use our handy chart again. Can raider assault remove stronghold? Because they don't want to initiate a battle unless they're guaranteed to remove a stronghold. Okay, so we have 8 raiders this time. And there's a fort in the space, and there's also a town in the space. And it turns out they could destroy either one with either 0 or 1 withdrawn troop inside. Okay, and there are going to be no withdrawn troops in this case because there aren't any there. So they will definitely initiate a battle in Regni. So pre-battle and field battle are all very easy. Nothing happens because there are no defenders there. So we go immediately to assault. If all defending units evaded, withdrew, or were removed, well, there aren't any such units, attacker may try to remove a defending stronghold. Okay, so that's what they're going to do now. The question is, which one? Do they attack the fort or do they attack the town? Well, we have our general priorities right here. Place, remove, and move. Second bullet point, sorry. Within that, and as otherwise able, target enemy and place friendly stronghold pieces first, forts, then towns, hill forts, settlements, then units, cavalry, then comitates, warbands, militia, raiders. Okay, so forts is the #1 priority. That's above towns. All right, so Saxon bot here will target the fort. Okay, So let's just go through the procedure. There's no coup de main here because they're not using surprise. So, next, escalate. Defenders, including the stronghold garrison, okay, we need to figure that out in a moment, strike. Each unit inflicting losses equal to escalate defense value. Apply those losses. Okay, so looking at the fort here, no, sorry, down here, forts, okay, fort has an escalate defense of 1 and has 1 garrison unit. So we're to imagine that there's a unit in there that inflicts 1 damage, and because raiders take half a damage each, that will destroy 2 raiders. Okay, that's the escalade. Next is storm. All units on both sides, including the stronghold garrison, strike. Each unit inflicting 1 loss each. Apply losses. Stronghold garrison units absorb losses first, then withdrawn pieces do. Okay, so there's 1 garrison unit in there. It strikes, removes 1 raider. These raiders strike, doing 5 damage to the garrison, so I guess the garrison's destroyed. Okay. Last bit. If all defending units, including the garrison, but not all attackers are eliminated, remove the target stronghold. Yep, that's exactly what happened. So this fort is eliminated. Now we have to go through the battle consequences to see if, well, anything happens. Okay, unless enemy is civitates before fragmentation, they were not. If cavalry fought and its side lost fewer pieces than the enemy, add 1 prestige. They did not. If cavalry fought and its side lost more pieces than the enemy, lower prestige. No, that didn't happen. Each fort or town destroyed lowers prestige by 2. Okay, that definitely happened. So prestige came down by 2. It's now at 10, and that lowers the Duke's victory condition to 70. Okay, next part. Each stronghold destroyed, attacker places 2 plunder, 3 of town, from off map onto attacking units, including cavalry if retaliate, and if Dukes gains 1 plus prestige, not against civitates before fragmentation. If in city, plunder all prosperity. Okay, so the Saxons are going to get an additional 2 plunder from off the map. I just remembered also that we need to lower prosperity by 1, and also the Duke's victory condition by 1 because the Saxons took 1 plunder off the board. Okay, so we're going to add 2 more plunder to the Saxons. There we are. Okay, carry on with the consequences. Next, if a barbarian faction lost fewer pieces than the enemy and survived, it gains 1 renown. Well, I don't think that's true. I mean, the Dukes only lost 1 piece, the fort, and the Saxons lost 3 raiders. So, no, that's not true. Just by the numbers. Okay. If executing faction kills enemies with plunder, it may either distribute half of it as desired among attacking units, or if Britain return 1 prosperity to the space, or if barbarian controlled space gain 1 renown for each. Alright, that didn't happen. They didn't kill any enemies with plunder. Alright, that's it. That's the end of the raid command in Raid. Okay, I just realized that I miscounted on their die roll. You've probably all been yelling at me this whole time. They actually rolled 11, not an 8. I was ignoring one of their one of the dice for some reason. So they should have another 3 here, actually. Okay, my mistake. I've corrected that. So they end up with 8 left. They lost 3 and end up with 8. Okay, now we're doing the raid on Coriol Towi. And this is the roll, again, a monster roll. It's 10 this time. Make sure I count it right. Yes, that's 10. Alright. Okay, so 10 raiders there. they were able to take all of the plunder because they're doing ravage. And ravage says that plunder may exceed population, so they're not restricted. In a normal raid, they'd be restricted to a maximum of 2. No matter how much plunder is there, they could only take 2 maximum. But with ravage, that maximum is removed. Okay, now they cannot do an assault here, but after plunder they roll a d6. If they roll a 4 to 6, the population will be reduced by 1. Okay, so let's do that now. It is a 6, so population -1 in Coryaltoe. Okay, so Coryaltoe's population's down by 1. That moves Britain control down by 1, cutting into their victory margin. Also means that the Kivitates pick up another refugees marker. Okay, the next part of Ravage is Dukes, then Kivitates, then Scotty. No unit more than once may force raiding Saxons to battle. No evade or withdraw. Okay. It's kind of an interesting issue here. When we go to Duke Spot's priorities and look at the Deep Raid Ravage box here, it says, force battle on raiding or ravaging units if cavalry removal not possible. Okay, and the Dukes have the first option to try to force a battle here. And so they obviously wouldn't lose any cavalry because they don't have any there. So might think, oh well, they'll force a battle. You know, effectively forcing the militia to battle for them. Okay. But if we look at the Kivitates bot here, it says force battle on raiding or ravaging units if friendly troops would remain. That's certainly not the case. That militia is going to be absolutely and utterly defeated. Okay, so the Kivitates definitely would not want to force a battle right now. But, you know, from the Duke's point of view, they're not going to lose any cavalry. Send those militia out to do their dirty work. Okay, but I don't think that the Dukes can actually do this because in order to initiate a battle, I mean, just looking at the battle command for the Dukes, I mean, it does say spaces with Dukes troops and enemy. So I think the fact that there are no Dukes troops there means that the Dukes can't initiate a battle, even if they have a fort there. And that makes perfect thematic sense. There's no person there. I guess the fort garrison is there, but no military leadership, I suppose. Okay, so I believe that there will be no forced battle against the Saxon raiders here. Okay, because the Dukes can't initiate a battle simply because they don't have any troops there, and the Kivitates are too afraid to initiate a battle because they'll get wiped out. All right, and now, of course, the Saxons could initiate a battle if they wanted to, but they can't do any assault because they're doing ravage, and ravage says no assault. You can't do an assault during a ravage. So that means that they don't want to battle because Saxon bot will only battle when they're guaranteed to remove a stronghold through assault, and they can't do that when they're ravaging. Okay, so that is the end of the raid of Coryaltoe. All right, last raid on Trinoantes. First they rolled 3d6. Didn't get quite as massive a roll this time. We have 7, which is good because I think 7 is all they have left for their raiders. Okay, yeah, 7. Okay, so they're all coming to the shores of Trinoantes. Once again, because they're doing ravage, they're not restricted on how much plunder they can take, so they take all of it. And now they roll a d6 to see if they will reduce the population. They roll a 3 this time, which does not reduce the population. Okay. However, it does bring prosperity down even more, cutting into the Duke's victory conditions. Okay, and we're in exactly the same position again when it comes to battle. The Dukes don't have any cavalry there to initiate a battle, and the Civitate have only one militia, which definitely would not be left on the field after battle. So neither the Dukes nor the Civitates want to initiate battle, and the Saxons don't want to battle either because during a ravage they can't use assault to take out a stronghold. So that is the end of Raid for the Saxons. So that is the end of this turn. On to the next card. The next card is Uther. The Duke spot is up first, and remember that they passed in order to get this card, but I actually think they're not going to end up taking it because the first priority, before they even think about the event, first priority for Duke spot is whether Intercept would battle more than 2d6 raiders. And the thing is, the Saxons just put all their raiders on the map, so there's 25 of them and another 5 Scotty over here, so 30 raiders on the map. So the answer to that is yes. Pretty clearly, it doesn't even matter what the roll is. Even if it were 12, they could still easily battle 12 raiders. Okay, so Intercept it is. So let's first remind ourselves how Intercept works. So they can choose any region with friendly control and raiders. Costs 2 resources per move origin space. And they do it by moving cavalry and or red federati either from adjacent spaces or along maintained roads with friendly control to raiders at friendly control and then battle raider factions. Okay, so just looking at where the raiders are on the map, over here in Dumnonii, there are 5 Scotty raiders, but that is not on the road. Road stops here, and Duratrius doesn't go all the way over there. So if they're going to intercept there, they would have to do it with these 2 cavalry that are sitting here in Duratrius. They're the only 2 that could get there, because they're adjacent. Similar consideration for Regni, which is not on the roads either. But there is some cavalry over here in Atrebates that they could move in there. Okay, the other places where there are raiders, Trinobantes and Corioltoi, are both on the roads. So lots of cavalry on the roads. They can move to those spaces. So let's see how the Duke spot wants to do this. You have to leave 1 friendly troop per fort. And remember, that troop could be Civitates. It does not have to be cavalry. Okay, first thing, unless able to retaliate, invite now. Okay, well, so we need to check and see if retaliation is a possibility for Duke spot. Here it says we're able to remove stronghold of Raiders faction. And they're not able to do that. The only stronghold on the board from the barbarian factions is the Scotty stronghold over here in Dematai, and there are no raiders there, so Intercept's not going to allow them to move any cavalry over there. It's also under Scotty control, so they can't move in there for that reason too, using Intercept, that is. Okay, so they're not able to retaliate, so they will start with an invite. So a reminder of how invite works. So they choose a space with Duke's Peace, and friendly control. That won't be hard to find. Costs 0 resources or 1 resource per converted piece. Okay, they're not going to convert any pieces in this case, so this won't cost anything. Procedure: either, if region, place up to 3 Saxon or 2 Scotty warbands and 1 matching settlement at a vacant site, or replacing a fort, all with red federati markers. Instead of that, they could pay 1 resource per piece to convert all blue federati of one nation in the space to red. They're not going to do that because there are no blue federati. Okay, and that's what would cost a resource to do that. Okay, so this costs nothing, and they're looking for a region to place up to 3 Saxon or 2 Scotty warbands and a settlement. So looking at their priorities, they need to roll a d6, and on 1 to 3 it'll be Scotty, 4 to 6 it will be Saxons, and they rolled a 3. Okay, so Scotty it is. Okay, place at a vacant site, only if no red federati settlements of that nation. Well, there are no red federati anywhere, so they'll find a vacant site to place a Scotty settlement. So I've marked all the spaces where there's at least one Duke's peace and it's under Britain control, and there's space for a settlement. Because they need a Duke's peace and Britain control in order to do invite in the first place. I messed that up in a previous video, so I'm being very careful this time. And also the Duke spot wants to ensure that they end up placing a settlement by using invite. So they want to make sure that they choose a space that has an open spot for settlement. Alright, so I marked all those spaces. Turns out there are 5 spaces that would qualify. And so they rolled randomly on that and ended up choosing Carweti up there. So they're going to invite in that space. I've marked all of the pieces that the Dukes could move here for this intercept command. And so I want to point out a few things. First of all, they want to prioritize moving Federati over Dukes, right? That's in the intercept priorities here. So we're trying to remove the most raiders able moving from friendly control spaces, and here are our priorities. Fewest spaces needed first, and Federati. Okay, and also they have to leave behind 1 friendly troop per fort. So that restricts some of the pieces that can move. For example, here in Dakiangli, there's a fort. There's no Kiwitates pieces there to protect it, so they have to leave behind 1 cavalry there, at least. Okay, and there's other pieces that can't move for other reasons, like there's a cavalry up here in Wotadini, and it could move, of course, but it's not on the road. So we could only go to an adjacent space, and there are no raiders there. So that piece is not going to move. Okay, but I just... kind of an interesting thing came up while I was doing this that I didn't think about before, because I've been thinking, the Dukes are kind of letting Kiwitates off the hook a lot here. I've been really concerned that the Kiwitates are just kind of going to run away with this game, which may, that may still happen, I don't know. But it seems like, what's going on here is that the barbarian factions raid, and then the Dukes intercept, and we just kind of rinse and repeat that over and over again, and the Kiwitates player just kind of sits there and says, okay, I'll just wait you guys out. I still control everything, so do your thing, I'll just wait. It seemed to me that the Dukes is going to have to get involved in trying to do something about Kiwitates control in order to avoid that situation. And here's a case in point. This card, Uther, the Duke's player went out of their way to pass in order to have a shot at this card, and then when it came time to do it, they said, nah, never mind, I'm going to intercept instead, because that was a higher priority for them. And if you look at the card, like what it actually does, it says Ruthless Warlord. Shift to military dominance. Select up to 3 regions with both a hill fort and cavalry. Each region remove 1 hill fort and 1 prosperity, and transfer 5 Britain resources or wealth to Duke's resources. So, among other things, what this would do is would shift to military dominance, which would take away one of the victory conditions for the Kiwitates, which is they have to be at civilian dominance. So that would have, taken a bite out of the Kiwitates right there. But they didn't do it. They're like, no, we're too concerned about raiders, so let's intercept instead. I thought, oh, here we go again. We're letting the Kiwitates off the hook, And again, it felt like they were just going to run away with the game. But It's kind of interesting because this intercept move is also going to affect the Civitates because of Ikeni. There's 2 cavalry there, and the Dukes are almost certainly about to move them. What's going to happen is the Saxons will take control of Ikeni, and that will drop the Britain control down one more, so that the Civitates will no longer be at their victory conditions. So this actually, even though they're doing the same old thing, intercept the raiders, this actually will affect Civitates now. Okay, so we've marked all of the dukes that can move. Let's figure out where they're going to go. Alright, so we've determined which pieces are going to move. And the main factor to make this determination was a lack of resources. Britain resources are only at 10. So they could only choose 5 spaces because it costs 2 resources per space to do this. So they're not going to be able to move all of the cavalry that they would like to. Okay, so in determining which spaces they were going to choose, we had to consider the priorities. First of all, they want to choose the fewest spaces needed. So the spaces with the most cavalry obviously will get selected. So Atrebates was automatically in. It has 4 cavalry there. And Textuarity was automatically out. There's only 1 cavalry that could move from there. And that's the lowest one. So that one was automatically out. This one was automatically in. All the rest of them had 2 movable pieces. Okay. But that also means that Carvetii is automatically in because it has 2 Federati, and that's also one of the priorities. They want to move Federati first. So that one was automatically chosen as well. All right, and that left 4 spaces that had 2 cavalry in them. And so they had to choose randomly from those. They have to not choose one of those because they don't have enough resources. So they could only take 3 of those 4. Okay, so I did some random rolling on that, and it turns out that Parisi will be left out. They're not going to move those cavalry. By the way, it almost seemed like they were not going to choose Ikeni after all, because Ikeni's not on the roads. But there are raiders adjacent that they can move to, so they can still choose Ikeni. Okay, so now let's see where they're going to move to. Because the dukes can't fight all the raiders on the map, I had to try to figure out how they would prioritize where to move. My thinking on this was that because they want to remove the most raiders able, that's in their priorities, sensible, they would prioritize spaces that already have some support from the Civitates. So a space that already has a militia piece in it, for example, because that piece can do some damage. Okay, so I thought, for example, Regni probably wouldn't be a priority for them because there's no support from any other pieces already there. Whereas a place like Dumnonii already has a militia in it, Trinowantes already has a militia in it, and Corioltowi already has a militia in it. Okay, but that thinking can only go so far. You know, one problem is, consider Corioltowi, there's 10 raiders there. So the militia can take out 1. Okay, well that leaves 9. So how many cavalry do we need to cover 9? Well, it's still 5. So so that militia doesn't really add any support there if the goal is to remove all of the pieces. So right now, for example, there are 5. Yeah. Yeah, I just had a thought. Actually, that does make a difference. I just had a thought. Okay. Let me just think out loud for a second. Okay, so maybe they shouldn't have moved one of those cavalry in there, and instead have moved it somewhere where it could definitely take out 2. Okay, because, you know, the intercept, it doesn't matter how many spaces they move to. That doesn't cost them any more. They can move to as many spaces as they want. They only pay by spaces they move from, which they've already paid for. So it doesn't. We don't have to think that they should try to take out all of them. We should try to think they should maximize the value of each individual cavalry. So by moving 5 in there, one of those cavalry is only going to remove half. Is only going to count for half, because it'll only remove. Because now we have 10.5 points worth of damage, if you like, when there's only 10 raiders. So maybe that cavalry should have moved down here to Regni instead, where it would remove 2 instead of just a half. That actually makes good sense. I think that actually is what should have happened. Okay. All right, so I'm going to move one of those cavalry from there to a place where it will have a bigger impact, which is Regni. Okay. And we can do that because in Atrebades there were 4 cavalry. So because Regni's not on the road, those cavalry have to come from an adjacent spot. But Atrebades had 4 cavalry in it, so it could have just moved from there. That's not an issue. Okay, yeah. So okay. So they can remove 8.5 up there now. Okay. Yeah. I guess that makes sense. Okay, down here though, the militia is going to help because there are 7. So they only needed to move in 3 cavalry / federati to be able to take them all out. So that militia actually will have some impact there. And same thing over here in Dumnoni, where there are 5. Just had to move in 2, which came from the adjacent spot. So even though they're not on the road, that was okay. Okay, so I think that'll cover it. All right, let's do the battles now. Well, I've had another thought, which is, I said that there were 4 cavalry in Atrebates at the beginning of this movement. So Regni really could take 1 more. So it occurred to me that maybe this cavalry here, which I had moved to Corioltoe, could conceivably have moved into Regni too. Again, thinking that each cavalry should be moved in such a way that it maximizes its value. Its value in both places would be it would be effective to remove 2 raiders in either location. So why prioritize that one over this one is the question. Seeing as it's adjacent, it could move into Regni, or it could move along the road up to Corioltoe. Okay. The 3 that are there moved along the road to get there. Right? They couldn't have got to Regni because they moved from places that are not adjacent to it. Regni's not on the road, so only the cavalry that were in Atrebades could actually move there. Okay, so that's correct. By the way, I think I should make it clear why the Federati ended up over here. The way I thought about it was to maximize the value of each cavalry, they would prioritize places with militia already in it and with an odd number of raiders, so that militia will be effective. So that meant Dumnonii and Trinoantes were prioritized. Okay, and Dumnonii is not on the road, so those 2 cavalry had to move from adjacent to Atrides. And there's just enough there to cover all the raiders with the help from the militia. Okay, and then the next priority I thought, well, should be Trinoantes, because again, there's a little help from militia there, so they needed to move in 3 pieces, Federati slash cavalry, to cover the rest of the raiders. Okay, so since that's the next priority, and Federati are on the priority list, they want to move Federati as soon as they can. They couldn't move them over here because they weren't adjacent to that, but they were on the road. They were up here in Carwetti on the road. So the Federati moved as soon as they could into Trinowantes. Okay, and then once that was all covered, the remaining the remaining cavalry that were moving, that were on the road, had to go to Corioltowi. Well, there were cavalry that moved from Ikeni also, but so they had to move to an adjacent space. One of them moved over here to Trinowantes, and one moved up to Corioltowi. Okay, so because they weren't on the road, they had to move adjacent. Okay, but the other cavalry there moved from the road, from some space that's on the road. Okay, so that leaves us with the question of where this 4th cavalry that was in Atrabadi should go. Seems to me they're equally, Regni and Corioltowi are of equal value as far as the priorities go. That cavalry would remove 2 raiders, or would have the possibility anyway of removing 2 raiders. We've already decided the space is moved from, and Federati are no longer in consideration. So I think they're of equal priority. So I'm going to have the Duke spot actually roll on that to see where that cavalry will move. Anyway, hopefully I've explained that sufficiently that it makes sense why it was done that way. So I ended up rolling a 6-2, which 6-2, Dumnoni, carry on, Corioltowi. Alright, so it ended up right where I had originally put it anyway. Okay, now I think we're ready to do the battles. So let's start up in the north and work our way down. We'll start with Corioltowi and do the battle there. So first part is to determine whether the raiders will try to evade. They are in home territory there. This is Fens. That's home territory for the Saxons, so got a good shot at evade, 50% shot. And that is what they're going to try to do. Here on the battle tactics it says, Raider defenders, if fighting alone, no ravage, evade, 4-6. So they're going to try it. And they succeeded. Rolled a 6. Okay, that's it for Corioltowi. There's nothing more to do. Just working through the battle. Field battle skipped when there's an evade. Assault is possible when all defenders evade, but there's no Saxon stronghold there, so that doesn't do anything. And there are no battle consequences without any kind of losses. So that's it. Now we'll do Trinowantes, which is also Fens, so we should see an evade roll here as well. And it has worked once again, another 6. So the Saxons evade once again. So nothing happens in Trinowantes to the Saxons either. Okay, Regni. Here they're in clear, not in Fens. So they could possibly evade, but this time they'd have to roll a 6. I mean, they've rolled 2 6s already. Maybe they can do it again. And it says if fighting alone, which they are, so they're going to try to evade. What do you reckon? Can they roll 3 6s in a row? They can, and they did. Believe it or not, it's another 6. So the Saxons managed to evade every single one of these battles. Will the Scotti do as well? Now they're in home terrain here too. They're in the hills. So, and they're fighting alone. So a 4-6 and they'll evade. Will the Scotti be as lucky as the Saxons? No. Okay. So the only unsuccessful evade is from the Saxons over here in Dumnoni. So we continue on with the battle there. It'll be a pretty straightforward battle. There's no trap, no withdraw. So just charge, ambush. The cavalry strike, applying losses. Okay, so 2 cavalry there. They take out 4 raiders. And then we have the melee step, where the warbands, federati, comitates, and militia strike. Okay, so that militia will take out the last of the raiders. Okay, that leaves that plunder on the battlefield. Now we have to consider the battle consequences. So the cavalry did fight, and they lost fewer pieces than the other side, so they get 1 prestige. And I've already added that prestige over there. Yeah, so that moves up the victory condition for the dukes. Okay, no fort was destroyed, or town. No stronghold was destroyed. Barbarians didn't lose fewer pieces. Okay, so this last bit. If executing faction kills enemies with plunder, yes, that happened, it may either distribute half of it as desired among attacking units, not cavalry, or if Britain return 1 prosperity to the space, or if barbarian in controlled space gain 1 renown for each. And we find out what the Dukes wants to do here. If killed enemies with plunder, take plunder. Exception: Dukes return prosperity if able, and not fragmentation. Okay, so the Duke's simply going to put that back. Okay, and that will also bring the Duke's victory condition up. Total prosperity up 1, and prosperity plus prestige up 1. Okay, I think that ends the intercept. It cost all of the Britain's resources. They're now totally broke. And we move on to the Civitates' turn. So now the Civitates' turn, they can either take the event or a limited command. So let's see what they'll do. First priority is battle. Okay. Without feat, evade, or ambush would add Britain control and or greater than 1d6 plunder. Alright, well there's no place where battle would add control. There's only 2 spaces that Britons do not control. That's Demetae, under Scotty control. There's no way that 1 militia is going to be able to fight through those warbands to gain control there. And Kenny, which is a little more promising, but still a battle scenario played out there, ignoring a feat, evade, or ambush, would just end up taking out 2 of each. So Saxons would still control it. Okay, the other question though is the greater than 1d6 plunder. So I have to see if that's a possibility. So I had them roll on that. They rolled a 5. So they'd have to pick up 6 or more plunder on a battle right now. Remember, this is a limited command, so they'd have to do it in a single space. Okay, but that's clearly not going to work. The only way they could get plunder is, looking at the battle consequences, destroy a stronghold. That'll pick up 2 plunder. Well, there's only 1 enemy stronghold on the board, and that's the Scotty stronghold here at Gateholm in Demetae. Okay, and again, that plucky little militia right there is not going to be able to fight through those warbands to take out that settlement. Okay, so that's no good. The only other way to get plunder is to kill enemies that have plunder. Okay, but even then you only get to keep half of it. Distribute half among the attacking units. Okay, so there'd have to be a single space where there are enemies holding 12 or more plunder. Okay, there's no space like that. Alright, so that's no good. So the answer is no. It's an effective priority event for the Civitates, and Civitates by sequence of play may use it. That, I believe, is true. In fact, they passed in order to have a chance at this. And the Dukes gave it the chance to this because they did the intercept instead here. Okay, so we need to know if this is an effective event. It has the sword going through it there, so that means there are some special instructions we need to look at. Here is the player aid for event instructions. So this is card 6, Uther. So follow that over to the Civitates. It says play shaded. Okay, they normally play the unshaded part of an event. If fragmentation, remove most cavalry able, if not least. Okay, it's not fragmentation, so they want to remove the least cavalry able, sounds like. Okay, we need to read the event, see what it does. The shaded part. Here it is. It says Rebellion against Tyrant. Shift to Civilian Dominance. Drop Prestige by -5. In any one region, replace all Duke's pieces with corresponding Civitates pieces. Cavalry to casualties. Oh, interesting. Well, that clearly is effective, so they're definitely going to take it. Okay, so they will execute the event. Okay, so we're going to shift to Civilian Dominance, but they're already there, so that does nothing. Drop Prestige by 5. Okay, so we'll do that. Prestige is down to 6, and that moves the Duke's victory condition down to 58. Okay, now the next part. In any one region, replace all Duke's pieces with corresponding Civitates pieces, and cavalry go to casualties. But remember our special instructions that said, if fragmentation, remove most cavalry able, if not least. Okay, so they want to remove the least cavalry. Okay, so they want to select a space that will change Duke's pieces to Civitates pieces, but they don't really want to remove any cavalry. That's the way I read that. Okay, well, I went to the playbook to get an idea of how this card works, because I found it just a little bit unclear. Okay, so Uther. Under the shaded event, the executing faction replaces any Duke's fort, either by a hill fort or, only if located on a town site, a town, and any cavalry, either by a militia or a comitates, not from the not yet in play box, and flips all red federati markers there to their blue side. Okay, well, that was interesting, because they could choose to flip some red federati to blue if they wanted. Okay, we have some federati warbands down here, and there's a federati fort up there. But both of those have some cavalry in them, and obviously the Civitates here could select spaces that don't have any cavalry at all, like Atrebates, for example. They could select this space, replace the fort with either a hill fort or a town, in this case, and they wouldn't replace any cavalry. Okay, but the only priority we're given is the least cavalry able. Okay, well, pick a spot where there's no cavalry, I guess. But this is also a spot with no cavalry. And that wouldn't, if they selected that region, nothing would happen there. So, are they supposed to select a space with a fort? Nothing says that they should, I guess. Except for just the general priorities, which say, when you're choosing what to replace or remove, do it in a certain order. But those priorities don't tell you that you should, that a bot should prioritize, or should try to remove or replace any particular piece. Okay, so I have to have a think about this. Well, we do have these event location priorities, general priorities for the bots that we could look at. So the first priority is to place the most friendly or remove most enemy strongholds than other pieces. But here's the thing. According to the definition in the rulebook of friendly, the Dukes are friendly because it's before fragmentation. The Dukes and the Civitates, they're not enemies at this point. So that priority is not telling us to try to take out a Duke's fort here. Because they're not, that wouldn't be an enemy stronghold. Okay, so carrying on. If Britain, add most federati markers possible of own color. Okay, well this can do that. It could flip the color of the federati either that settlement up there or these war bands down here. But unfortunately, if the Kibitates choose either of those spaces, they'll also be choosing a space that has at least one cavalry in it, which would go against this, which says if it's not fragmentation, then remove the least cavalry able. And they could remove 0 cavalry simply by choosing a space with no cavalry in it. So that's possible, to choose 0. So choosing either of those spaces would not remove the least cavalry able, because they could remove 0 here. So I think they can't select either of those 2 spaces to do that. Okay. If barbarian, they're not barbarian. If Britain flips C's, okay, so that's for C's. That's it as far as priorities there. So I think because it's before fragmentation, the way we should think about this is the Kibitates player should take a look at this card and say, yeah, I want that because it will drop prestige. But I don't really care about any of the rest of it. We're already at civilian dominance, and I don't really want to remove any cavalry or any Duke's pieces. They're still my friend. I just want to push them away from victory, is all. But I still like having the Dukes on the board, you know, going around and taking out raiders and that sort of thing. So I don't want to interrupt with any of that business. So I guess that's how we're supposed to think of it. In which case, this is easily accomplished, right? Because this just says in any one region, replace all Duke's pieces with corresponding Kibitates pieces. Okay, well then they can just, you know, do something like, I pick that region. Replace all the Duke's pieces in there with corresponding Kibitates pieces. Okay, done. So I think that's what they're going to do. Well, I've had a little think about this, and you know, the only priority we're given is to remove the least cavalry able, and like I said, that is 0. The Kibitates could manage to do this event and not remove any cavalry. Okay, and then I said, well, they'll just choose a random spot with no cavalry, you know, or no Duke's pieces in it at all, and call it good. But the thing is, there are some spaces that do have some Duke's pieces in them, like Atrabates here, that has a fort, but no cavalry. And, I mean, the general priorities say to target enemy strongholds, okay, and the Dukes technically are not an enemy here, so the priorities are not telling us to target that fort. But the thing is that the priorities are also not telling us not to target that fort, as far as I can tell. Yeah, because it says, I guess so. I mean, it says place most friendly or remove most enemy stronghold, then other pieces. So nothing there about not removing friendly pieces, right? It says place most friendly pieces or remove most enemy strongholds. Okay, nothing there about failing to remove friendly strongholds. So I think it's open season on those forts. So what I was thinking is we should just randomly select a space that has no cavalry in it, and if there just so happens to be a fort in that space, then so be it. That fort gets replaced by the Kibitates stronghold, and I think that makes thematic sense too. I mean, the Kibitates, like I said, they want the cavalry to stick around to you know pest control over these barbarian factions. But I don't think they'd mind so much if a Roman fort disappeared and was replaced by one of their own stronghold. Okay, so I think that is what the Kibitates bot would do here. Right, the only priority we have is to select a space where the fewest cavalry will be removed. Okay, fine. That's all the spaces with no cavalry in it, and then that's it. No other priorities are given, and there's no general priorities given. So it's random from there, right? That's the way it works. Okay, so I'm going to do a random roll, and we'll see which of these spaces come up. It could be that they end up with one with a fort in it. There's two spaces, Atrobates and Cantiaci here, that do have Roman forts in them without any Roman cavalry. So let's see what happens. Okay, they rolled a 6-4, which when we go to the chart gives us Solures, but that has cavalry in it. So wrapping around, we come to these spaces. These all have cavalry in them as well, but we finally get to Nullitaire. Okay, way up in the north there, with no cavalry, but there's also no other Duke's pieces there, so nothing will happen after all. On to the next turn. The next card is Alans, I guess, but the Epoch, first Epoch card has been revealed. So that means that these two switch places in the next round. It's an Epoch round. But we will do that in the next video. This video's gone on long enough. So we're going to stop here and we'll start the next video with the Epoch round. I hope to see you then. Till then, bye.